Hi everybody, I'm doing my speech 4 presentation on genetically engineered babies. Now, have you ever wanted the perfect baby to have like the perfect hair, perfect eye color, skin tone, anything? Well, it's right at our fingertips, and they're called designer babies. Now, designer babies, by definition, are any baby whose genetic makeup has been selected artificially, and it's combined with in vitro fertilization to preserve the absence or presence of the selected gene. Now, the genes can be anything from illnesses or diseases to physical traits or personality traits. Well, it was intended to only affect the illnesses and diseases. It just wanted to help weed out anything that can be genetically passed down from mom and dad to their child. And same as in vitro fertilization, it was only intended to help those who couldn't have kids, or their bodies wouldn't let them have the child, or one person had it taken away from them or anything like that. Well, it all starts off nice. However, something so appealing as having the perfect child or your kid never getting sick, it's a really appealing thought, but it has its effects, and there are things that people aren't really thinking about when they do it. They're just thinking short term, and they think it's going to affect them in the long term, but they're not really taking everything into consideration, such as uniqueness. When your child has anything such as like a congenital squint that you have or your husband has, and you want to put it together, and you don't want your child to have that anymore because you had a problem with it struggling when you grew up or anything like that, there's a couple that actually had a congenital squint and they want it taken away. They didn't want their kid to have it, so they want it genetically engineered, gone. Well, things such as this take away little things that make a person unique. We'll eventually start taking away, say, how I want blue eyes and blonde hair. Going back to like Hitler, he was trying to weed it out. He didn't have the means to do it genetically, but I mean, he was killing off people who didn't have this look that he envisioned. And basically, with genetic engineering, we're not killing people, but we are weeding them out in a different type of way. And it's such an expensive procedure that only certain people can afford it, because your insurance will only cover things such as the illnesses. Now, there are things that you don't want, like there are people who can actually create their kids to be better at sports. Now, when you do better at sports, you're focused all your traits on the sports, so you take away from other things. And what people don't really understand is that eventually, when you're doing this, you're going to lose any uniqueness of a child, because they're going to be what you made them to be. They're not going to be who they are. When you have a child that is conceived naturally, it's a toss-up of the genes. Now, if you're selecting each gene, then your child is just a robot or something that's been genetically engineered. It's not really a child anymore. It's just something that you created. We're not playing God. We need to stop trying to. I get the idea of trying to weed out diseases, which is the one thing that I think we should keep, but we should really limit and restrict it. But it is an expensive procedure, and being so expensive, only a few people can afford it, so they can create children that are better at sports, and these kids who are better at sports or better at science or math will excel in these areas, and they'll become doctors or NBA players and such. But it's just, it'll make them make more money in the long term, and they'll get better jobs than anybody else, because they don't excel at these things as well as other people, because they have just a toss-up of traits, whereas other people are genetically selected to be fantastic at these selected few traits. It could also create a superbug. Trying to kill off all these illnesses and protect our children, and it's a good thought, but what you don't think of is by selecting these genes and taking away the other genes that can make them sick, you could also be creating a superbug that nobody's seen before, there's no cure for yet, and it could possibly potentially wipe out most of the population without us even knowing it. I just think we should stop any unnecessary changes, and we just need to take everything very slowly and be very cautious about it. Now, the only thing that I can see the future as, if you think about the future, when you have genetically engineered babies or genetically selected babies, it seems to be more like the Superman Krypton. if you think about it. If anybody's ever seen Superman, or in Krypton, they have a pod where they have all the kids who are being born, I guess, in a way. They've all been genetically engineered, and they're in these little bitty pods that they are developed in, and then they eventually come out of it, and they have a selective field where they've been genetically selected for or engineered for. All the doctors have been genetically engineered since before they were conceived in the little pods or the cups or whatever you want to conceive them in. Then that's what they're going to do when they grow up. So when they're born, from the second they're born to when they actually take on the responsibility of being a doctor, they're being taught to be a doctor because that's what's in their brain, that's what they're wired to do. They don't really know anything else. And same as the bad guy in Superman, I don't remember his name, but he was just simply trying to preserve Krypton, whereas he doesn't really have any morals or any thoughts of his own. He only has the one instinctual thought as to preserve Krypton and all of its people. So throughout the whole movie, if you think about it, if we genetically engineer babies, we could potentially be creating a society where there isn't any children who have any uniqueness to them. They don't really have a thought of their own. They're just going through the motions and are not really living life. They don't really have anything that makes them them. They're just sort of creating a society where people are people. They're basically just a futuristic robotic society, and we should just be really limited and restricted on what we choose and how we choose to do it. I just think we need to keep an eye on it. And I don't think that genetically engineering babies is going to lead us down the right path, and we really need to try and kill that. But I mean, to each their own. I get trying to preserve children and trying to make sure that your kids don't have any diseases or illnesses, because we are a society where we care about kids, and that is a good thing. We care about our own children, we care about other people's children, but we need to think about in the future too. I want my child to have its own guts. I want it to have his own opinion. You want him to be able to do whatever he wants. I don't want him to be genetically engineered to do something. I don't want my great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren to be born to do something that they don't even really know that they're going to have to do, because that's all they have in them. Their instinctual impulses are just to do what they've been genetically engineered to do. I want them to be their own person. I want them to be unique, and I want them to live life. And I just think that people should really think about their actions before they do them. Thank you.